Marcus Rodriguez pulled his black pickup truck into the driveway of his new home on Maple Drive. The house was nothing fancy, but it was perfect for what he needed. After 15 years of being a sheriff, he wanted somewhere quiet. Somewhere he could just be a regular guy when he came home from work. The moving truck had left an hour ago, and now Marcus stood in his empty living room looking around. Boxes were stacked everywhere. He had a lot of work to do, but he was not in a hurry. For the first time in years, he had nowhere urgent to be. No emergency calls, no criminals to chase, no paperwork waiting on his desk. Willowbrook Estates was the kind of place where people mowed their lawns every Saturday and painted their mailboxes the same shade of blue. The houses all looked similar but nice. There were tree-lined streets, sidewalks where kids could ride bikes, and a small park in the center of the neighborhood. It was exactly what Marcus had been looking for when he decided to move. Marcus was 42 years old and had spent most of his adult life in law enforcement. He started as a regular police officer right out of college. Over the years, he worked his way up through detective work, then sergeant, and finally sheriff of the county. It was good work, important work, but it was also hard work. Every day brought new problems, new crimes, new people who needed help or needed to be stopped. The job had cost him his marriage 3 years ago. Sarah had said she felt like she was married to the badge, not the man. She was not wrong. Marcus spent so much time thinking about work that he forgot how to think about anything else. When she left, he realized he needed to find balance in his life. That was why he chose to keep his job quiet in this new neighborhood. He did not want to be known as Sheriff Rodriguez here. He just wanted to be Marcus, the guy who lived in the house on Maple Drive. He wanted neighbors who would talk to him about normal things like the weather or sports, not ask him about crime rates or when the police would catch some criminal. Marcus walked outside to get another box from his truck. The evening air was warm and pleasant. A few neighbors were outside working in their yards or walking their dogs. They waved at him and he waved back. Everyone seemed friendly enough. This was good. This was what he had hoped for. As he lifted a heavy box from the truck bed, an older woman walked over from the house next door. She had gray hair and wore a bright yellow shirt with flowers on it. "Hello there," she said with a big smile. "You must be our new neighbor. I'm Helen Martinez. My husband and I live right next door." "Nice to meet you, Helen. I'm Marcus Rodriguez." He set the box down and shook her hand. "Well, Marcus, welcome to Willowbrook Estates. You picked a wonderful place to live. We have been here for 8 years now and we just love it. Very quiet, very safe. Perfect for families," Marcus smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping for. I work long hours, so I really wanted somewhere peaceful to come home to." "Oh, what kind of work do you do?" Helen asked. Marcus had prepared for this question. "I work for the county government. Lots of paperwork, lots of meetings." Pretty boring stuff. It was not exactly a lie. Being sheriff did involve working for the county, and there was definitely a lot of paperwork and meetings. He just left out the part about arresting criminals and carrying a gun. "Well, that sounds important," Helen said. "We need good people working in government. My husband Tom works in accounting. He should be home soon if you would like to meet him." "That would be great," Marcus said. "I should probably get these boxes inside first, though." Of course. Don't let me keep you. But before you go, I should mention that we have a really active neighborhood association here. They keep everything running smoothly. There are rules about things like lawn care and parking and noise levels. Nothing too strict, just enough to keep the neighborhood looking nice." Marcus nodded. Most neighborhoods like this had homeowner associations. He expected that. "Sounds reasonable. I'll make sure to follow the rules." "Oh, I'm sure you will. You seem like a very nice man. And don't worry. If you ever have questions about the rules, our security team is very helpful. They patrol the neighborhood regularly and make sure everyone knows what's expected." "Security team?" Marcus asked. This was new information. "Yes, we have 3 very dedicated men who volunteer their time to keep us all safe. They drive around in their security vehicle and make sure everything is in order. Very professional." Derek Hoffman is the leader. He takes the job very seriously. Marcus felt a small warning bell go off in his head. In his experience, people who took volunteer security jobs very seriously sometimes took them too seriously. But maybe he was just being paranoid after years of police work. "That's good to know," he said. "I appreciate the information. You'll probably meet them soon. They're very thorough about welcoming new residents and making sure everyone understands how things work around here." After Helen went back to her house, Marcus continued moving boxes. As he worked, he thought about what she had said. A volunteer security team was not unusual for a neighborhood like this. Many gated communities and planned neighborhoods had them. Usually they were retired guys who wanted to feel useful, or younger guys who liked the idea of having some authority. Most of the time they were harmless, but Marcus had dealt with people who thought a little bit of authority made them important. Some security guards, some mall cops, some people who worked for private companies. Most were fine, but a few let the power go to their heads. They started acting like real police officers when they had no training and no real authority. He hoped that would not be a problem here. All he wanted was to live quietly and mind his own business. He had dealt with enough difficult people at work. He did not need to deal with them at home, too. As the sun started to set, Marcus carried the last box into his house. Tomorrow he would start unpacking and making the place feel like home. Maybe he would introduce himself to more neighbors. Maybe he would take a walk around the neighborhood and see what it was really like. For now, though, he was just happy to be here. Willowbrook Estate seemed like exactly what he had been looking for. A place where he could be just another regular guy living a regular life. What could go wrong with that? Marcus had been living in Willowbrook Estates for 5 days when he first saw the security team Helen had mentioned. He was sitting on his front porch early in the morning, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, when a white SUV slowly drove down Maple Drive. The vehicle had Willowbrook Security written in big black letters on both sides. Red and blue lights were mounted on the roof, though they were not flashing. As it passed his house, Marcus could see 3 men inside wearing what looked like police uniforms. The SUV stopped at the house across the street where an elderly man was watering his flowers. One of the uniformed men got out and walked over to talk to the homeowner. Even from his porch, Marcus could hear that the conversation was not friendly. The security guard was pointing at something and seemed to be giving the old man some kind of lecture. Marcus watched this with interest. In his years as a sheriff, he had learned to pay attention when something did not look right, and something about this scene bothered him. The security guard was standing too close to the elderly man, invading his personal space in a way that seemed meant to intimidate. His body language was aggressive, with his chest puffed out and his hands on his hips. He kept touching the empty holster on his belt like he was threatening to draw a weapon he did not have. After about 10 minutes, the guard returned to the SUV, and they drove away. The elderly man stood in his yard looking upset and confused. Marcus finished his coffee and walked across the street. "Good morning," he said to the man, who was still holding his garden hose. "I'm Marcus Rodriguez. I just moved in across the street." "Oh, hello. I'm Frank Williams. Welcome to the neighborhood." Frank looked tired and frustrated. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay? I saw you talking to the security guard." Frank shook his head. "I honestly don't know what that was about. That man, Derek I think his name is, said my flowers were planted too close to the sidewalk. He said it was a violation of neighborhood rules and I needed to move them or face a fine." Marcus looked at the flower bed. The flowers were clearly on Frank's property, several feet back from the sidewalk. There was no way they could be considered a violation of anything. "Have you lived here long?" Marcus asked. 12 years, Frank said. "I planted those flowers when we first moved in. Nobody ever said there was a problem before. But these security guys, they seem to find problems everywhere they look." "What do you mean?" "Well, last week they told my neighbor that his trash cans were the wrong color. The week before that, they said Mrs. Chen was walking her dog in the wrong area of the park. They're always driving around, always watching, always finding something to complain about." Marcus felt that warning bell in his head getting louder. This was starting to sound like people who had too much time and too much imagined authority. "Did they show you any paperwork about the flower rule?" Marcus asked. "No, he just told me I was in violation and walked away. Very rude about it, too. Talked to me like I was a criminal or something." Marcus thanked Frank for the information and walked back to his house. As a sheriff, he knew that real security officers always had documentation when they cited violations. They had to be able to prove that rules were actually being broken. The fact that this Derek person just made demands without showing any proof was a red flag. 2 days later, Marcus had his own encounter with the Willowbrook security team. He was coming home from the grocery store and had parked his truck in his driveway. As he was unloading bags of food, the white SUV pulled up and stopped right behind his truck, blocking him in. 3 men got out. The leader was a stocky man in his 30s with a buzz cut and a serious expression. His uniform looked official, complete with a badge, patches, and a utility belt. The other two men were younger and tried to look just as serious, but Marcus could tell they were nervous. "Excuse me, sir," the leader said, walking up to Marcus. "I'm Derek Hoffman, Chief of Security for Willowbrook Estates. We need to talk." Marcus set down his grocery bags and looked at Derek calmly. "What can I do for you?" "You're parked illegally," Derek said, pointing at the truck. "Your vehicle is extending beyond your property line onto the street. That's a violation of Neighborhood Ordinance 47B. Marcus looked at his truck. The back bumper was maybe 6 inches past the edge of his driveway, barely touching the beginning of the street. In 15 years of law enforcement, he had never seen anyone cited for such a minor parking issue. "I see," Marcus said. "Can you show me the specific ordinance you're referring to?" Derek's expression hardened. "I don't need to show you anything. I'm telling you there's a violation and you need to move your vehicle immediately." One of the younger men stepped closer. "You also need to provide identification so we can document this incident." Marcus almost smiled. These guys had no idea who they were dealing with. But he decided to play along for now and see what they would do. "I'm sorry, but I don't think I need to show ID for parking in my own driveway," Marcus said politely. "Actually, you do," Derek said, his voice getting more aggressive. "When you're in violation of neighborhood security regulations, you're required to provide identification to security personnel." "And what happens if I don't?" Marcus asked. The third man, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Then we'll have to detain you until we can verify your identity and determine if you're authorized to be in this neighborhood." Now Marcus was really interested. These three men were talking like they had police powers. They thought they could demand ID, cite violations, and even detain people. But Marcus knew they had no such authority. They were just volunteers for a homeowner association. "I tell you what," Marcus said, staying calm and friendly. "Let me move my truck right now so it's not a problem." He got in his truck and pulled it forward about 2 feet, so it was completely in his driveway. Then he got out and looked at Derek. "Better?" he asked. Derek looked annoyed that Marcus had complied so easily. It was clear he had been hoping for more confrontation. "This time," Derek said, "but we'll be watching. New residents need to understand that we take security very seriously here. We have zero tolerance for people who think they can ignore the rules." "I understand," Marcus said. "I certainly don't want to cause any problems." As the three men got back in their SUV, Marcus memorized their license plate number and took note of their uniforms and equipment. His law enforcement training kicked in automatically. He was already thinking about how to find out more about these guys. After they drove away, Marcus went inside and called his friend Jake, who worked in the county clerk's office. "Jake, it's Marcus. I need you to look something up for me. Can you check if there's any kind of official security contract or license for something called Willowbrook Security? They're supposedly operating in the Willowbrook Estates neighborhood." "Sure, give me a few minutes," Jake said. While he waited, Marcus thought about what he had just experienced. Derek and his team were acting like police officers, but something about them was all wrong. Real officers knew how to de-escalate situations. These guys seemed to want confrontation. Real officers had proper documentation for violations. These guys just made demands. Jake called back 20 minutes later. "Marcus, there's no record of any Willowbrook security company having a license in this county. No security contract filed with the HOA either." "Are you sure that's the right name?" "I'm sure," Marcus said. "Thanks, Jake." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his kitchen thinking. Derek and his friends were operating without any official authority. They were just volunteers who had decided to dress up like cops and boss people around. In most cases, that would just be annoying. But Marcus had seen what happened when people with no training and no oversight thought they had power over others. Things could escalate quickly and people could get hurt. He hoped it would not come to that. All he wanted was to live peacefully in his new neighborhood. But if these fake security guards kept pushing people around, someone was going to have to stop them. Marcus just did not know yet that someone would turn out to be him. The real trouble started on a Saturday morning 2 weeks after Marcus had moved into Willowbrook Estates. He was trying to move a heavy dresser from his truck into his house. The furniture was awkward and heavy, so he had parked the truck with its tailgate hanging slightly over the edge of his driveway. Marcus was struggling with the dresser when he heard a car door slam behind him. He turned around to see the white security SUV parked in the street. Derek Hoffman and his two companions were walking toward him with determined expressions. "Sir," You need to stop what you're doing and move that vehicle immediately, Derek announced in a loud voice that carried across the quiet neighborhood. Marcus set down his end of the dresser and wiped sweat from his forehead. Good morning, Derek. I'm just moving some furniture. I'll have the truck moved in about 10 minutes. No, you'll move it now, Derek said, stopping about 3 feet away from Marcus. Your vehicle is illegally parked and creating a safety hazard. The younger man with blonde hair stepped up beside Derek. We've told you before about parking violations. This is your second offense. Marcus looked at his truck. The tailgate was maybe a foot past his driveway, barely into the street. There was plenty of room for cars to pass on either side. No safety hazard existed. Look, guys, I understand you have a job to do, Marcus said reasonably, but I'm just trying to move my furniture. Give me 10 minutes and the truck will be gone. You don't seem to understand the seriousness of this situation, the third man said. He was taller than the others and kept touching his empty holster. We have authority to issue citations for violations like this. Derek pulled out a small notebook and pen. I need to see your driver's license and vehicle registration. For parking in my own driveway? Marcus asked. For parking illegally and failing to comply with a lawful order from security personnel, Derek replied. Marcus felt his patience starting to run thin. These 3 men were acting like they had police powers they definitely did not have. But he also knew that getting angry would not help the situation. Derek, can I ask you something? What exactly gives you the authority to demand my ID? Derek's face reddened. I'm the chief of security for this neighborhood. That gives me the authority to enforce all rules and regulations. Chief of security, Marcus repeated. That's interesting. Can you show me your credentials? Any certification or license that gives you police powers? The blonde man stepped closer to Marcus. You don't get to question our authority. You either comply with our instructions or face the consequences. What consequences? Marcus asked. We can issue fines, have your vehicle towed, or detain you until the police arrive, Derek said. Marcus almost laughed. These guys had no idea that they were threatening a sheriff, but he was curious to see how far they would push this. Okay, Marcus said. Let's say I don't move my truck and I don't show you my ID. What exactly are you going to do? Derek looked at his 2 companions, then back at Marcus. First, we'll issue you a citation with a fine. Second, we'll call a tow truck. Third, if you interfere with our duties, we'll place you under citizen's arrest. Citizen's arrest, Marcus said thoughtfully. Do you guys know what the legal requirements are for a citizen's arrest? We know the law, the tall man said defensively. Really? So you know that you can only make a citizen's arrest if you personally witness someone committing a felony, or certain specific misdemeanors involving breach of peace. Derek looked uncomfortable. Parking violations and failure to comply with security orders qualify. Marcus shook his head. Actually, they don't. Parking in your own driveway isn't a crime at all. And security guards have no more authority than regular citizens to demand compliance with anything. You're wrong, Derek said, but he sounded less confident than before. I'm really not, Marcus said calmly. Look, I don't want any trouble. I'll move my truck in a few minutes. But you guys should be careful about claiming authority you don't actually have. Derek's face was getting redder. Are you threatening us? Not at all. I'm just giving you some friendly advice. Impersonating law enforcement officers is a serious crime. We're not impersonating anyone, the blonde man said quickly. Marcus gestured at their uniforms. Official-looking uniforms, badges, utility belts, a vehicle with emergency lights. You're demanding ID, threatening to issue citations, talking about detention and arrest. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, we have every right to wear these uniforms, Derek insisted. Maybe, Marcus said, but you don't have the right to act like police officers when you're not. Derek stepped closer to Marcus, close enough that their chests were almost touching. Listen carefully. I don't know who you think you are, but this is my neighborhood. I make the rules here. You can either follow them, or you can find somewhere else to live. This was the moment when Marcus realized that Derek was not just some overzealous volunteer. There was something darker going on here. Derek was enjoying the confrontation. He wanted to intimidate people. He liked having power over his neighbors. Your neighborhood? Marcus asked quietly. That's right. I keep this place safe and orderly. People who don't appreciate that aren't welcome here. Marcus looked around. Several neighbors had come outside and were watching the confrontation from their yards. An elderly woman across the street looked frightened. A man walking his dog had stopped to stare. This was exactly what Marcus had moved here to avoid. drama, confrontation, and people who thought they could push others around. But he was starting to realize that avoiding Derek and his crew might not be possible. "Derek, I'm going to move my truck now," Marcus said. "But after I do, I think we should all take a step back and think about how we want this neighborhood to work." "The neighborhood works fine," Derek replied. "It's new residents who cause problems." Marcus walked to his truck and drove it completely onto his driveway. When he got out, Derek and his companions were still standing there watching him. "Happy now?" Marcus asked. "For now," Derek said. "But we'll be keeping a close eye on you. People who don't respect authority tend to cause problems." As the three men walked back to their SUV, Marcus heard Derek talking to his companions. "That guy thinks he's smart," Derek said. "But he doesn't know who he's dealing with. We need to make sure he understands how things work around here." After they drove away, Marcus's neighbor Helen came over from next door. "I'm so sorry about that," she said. "Derek has been getting worse lately. More aggressive, more demanding. A lot of us are getting tired of it." "Has anyone complained to the homeowner association?" Marcus asked. "We've tried, but Derek always says he's just doing his job, and the HOA board seems afraid to do anything about it. They don't want to be responsible if something bad happens and there's no security." Marcus nodded. "What about calling the real police?" "For what? He hasn't actually broken any laws, has he? He's just unpleasant." Marcus thought about that. Helen was right that being unpleasant was not illegal. But impersonating law enforcement officers was. So was harassment and intimidation. The question was whether Derek would cross those lines. Based on what Marcus had just experienced, he had a feeling the answer was yes. That evening, Marcus sat on his porch thinking about the situation. He had three choices. He could ignore Derek and hope the man would leave him alone. He could complain to the HOA and hope they would do something. Or he could wait for Derek to make a serious mistake and then use his real authority to stop him. Marcus hoped it would not come to that third option. But Derek seemed like the kind of person who would keep pushing until someone pushed back. Marcus just wished Derek knew who he was pushing. After the confrontation over his truck, Marcus hoped that Derek and his security team would back off and leave him alone. He was wrong. 3 days later, Marcus came home from work to find a bright orange notice taped to his front door. The paper had Willowbrook Estate Security Violation Notice printed at the top in bold letters. Below that, someone had written in sloppy handwriting that Marcus was being cited for failure to maintain acceptable lawn standards. Marcus looked at his yard. The grass was green and neatly trimmed. He had mowed it just 2 days ago. There was absolutely nothing wrong with his lawn. He walked next door to talk to Helen, who was working in her garden. "Helen, did you get one of these?" he asked, showing her the orange paper. Helen looked at it and shook her head. "No, but Derek has been handing those out to a lot of people lately. Mrs. Johnson got one last week for having too many flowers in her front yard." "Can you believe that? Too many flowers. What's the point of these notices?" Marcus asked. "Do they actually mean anything?" "Derek says they're official violations that go in your permanent file with the homeowner association. He claims that too many violations can result in fines or even force you to sell your house." Marcus examined the notice more carefully. It was just a piece of paper with no official letterhead, no signature, and no reference to any specific rule or regulation. Any real citation would have detailed information about what law or rule was violated and what the penalty would be. "Helen, has anyone ever actually paid a fine based on one of these notices?" "Not that I know of. But Derek makes it sound very serious. He says we should be grateful he's protecting our property values by keeping standards high." That evening, Marcus decided to do some research. As sheriff, he had access to databases that could tell him about Derek Hoffman's background. What he found was very interesting. Derek had tried to become a police officer 3 different times. He had applied to the county sheriff's department, the city police force, and the state patrol. All 3 had rejected his applications. According to the records, Derek had failed the psychological evaluation twice and the physical fitness test once. Marcus also found 2 arrest records for Derek in neighboring counties. Both arrests were for impersonating a police officer. In the first case, Derek had worn a fake uniform and tried to pull people over for traffic violations. In the second case, he had posed as a detective and tried to question witnesses about a burglary. Both times, Derek had received only probation and community service. The judges had apparently seen him as more of a nuisance than a real threat. Marcus was starting to understand Derek's psychology. The man desperately wanted to be a police officer but could not qualify for the job. So he had found a way to play cop in a neighborhood where most people did not know any better. The next few days brought more evidence that Derek was escalating his behavior. On Thursday morning, Marcus saw Derek and his team stop Frank Williams, the elderly man with the flower garden. This time, Derek demanded that Frank show identification and prove he lived in the neighborhood. When Frank protested that he had been living there for 12 years, Derek threatened to call the police and report him as a trespasser. On Friday evening, Marcus watched Derek confront a teenage girl who was walking her dog in the neighborhood park. Derek accused her of violating the leash law because her dog was on a 6-foot leash instead of a 4-foot leash. When the girl said she had never heard of such a rule, Derek told her she was being disrespectful to authority and threatened to ban her from the park. On Saturday, Derek and his crew followed a delivery truck around the neighborhood for 20 minutes, claiming the driver was speeding and needed to be stopped. The delivery driver eventually called his company, who called the police to report harassment. When real police officers arrived, they told Derek to leave the delivery driver alone. Derek argued with them, claiming he had authority to enforce traffic laws in the neighborhood. The officers explained that he did not have any such authority and warned him about interfering with legitimate business activities. Marcus watched this incident from his front yard. He could see Derek's frustration at being corrected by real police officers. It was clear that Derek did not like being reminded that he was just a civilian with no actual power. That same Saturday afternoon, Marcus had his own encounter with Derek's escalating behavior. Marcus was washing his car in his driveway when the white security SUV pulled up. All 3 men got out, but this time Derek looked angry before he even spoke. "We need to talk," Derek announced. "What about?" Marcus asked, continuing to wash his car. "You've been asking questions about us around the neighborhood," Derek said. "People have told us that you're spreading rumors and trying to undermine our authority." Marcus had not been spreading rumors, but he had talked to several neighbors about Derek's behavior. Apparently, word had gotten back to Derek. "I'm just trying to understand how things work around here," Marcus said calmly. "How things work is simple," Derek replied. "We provide security. Residents follow the rules. People who cause problems get dealt with." The blond man stepped forward. "We know you talked to Mrs. Martinez about us, and Mr. Williams, and the lady with the teenage daughter." "I talked to my neighbors," Marcus said. "Is that against the rules too?" "It is when you're spreading lies and trying to turn people against us," Derek said. Marcus set down his sponge and faced Derek directly. "What lies?" "I haven't told anyone anything that isn't true. You told people we don't have authority to do our jobs. That's not a lie. You don't have authority to demand ID or issue citations or detain people." Derek's face was getting red again. "We have every right to maintain order in this neighborhood." "Maintain order, maybe. Act like police officers, no." The tall man spoke up. "You seem to know a lot about police authority. What's your background?" Marcus almost smiled. They had no idea how much he knew about police authority. "I work for the county government," Marcus said, which was technically true. "Doing what?" Derek pressed. "Administrative work mostly. Lots of meetings with law enforcement agencies." Derek looked suspicious. "What kind of meetings?" Marcus was getting tired of the questions. "The kind that are none of your business." "Everything in this neighborhood is our business," Derek said. "Really? Who decided that?" "The homeowner association hired us to provide security services." "Did they? Can you show me the contract?" Derek hesitated. "That's confidential information." "Convenient," Marcus said. Derek stepped closer to Marcus. "You know what I think? I think you're some kind of troublemaker who moved here to cause problems. Maybe you have a criminal background. Maybe that's why you don't want to cooperate with security." "You think I'm a criminal?" Marcus asked. "I think you're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what it is." Marcus looked at Derek for a long moment. The man was clearly paranoid and possibly dangerous. His behavior was getting worse every day, and he was starting to target Marcus specifically. "Derek, let me give you some advice," Marcus said quietly. "You should be very careful about making accusations you can't prove." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. Keep pushing people around, and eventually you're going to push the wrong person." Derek smiled coldly. "Are you saying you're the wrong person?" Marcus went back to washing his car. I'm saying you should think about what you're doing before it gets you in trouble. After Derek and his team left, Marcus went inside and made a phone call to his office. Detective Wilson? It's Sheriff Rodriguez. I need you to run a complete background check on someone for me. Derek Hoffman, probably mid-30s, lives somewhere in or near Willowbrook Estates. Official business, Sheriff? Marcus thought about that. Let's call it preliminary investigation. This guy is impersonating law enforcement in my neighborhood. I want to know everything about him before I decide what to do about it. I'll have it for you by Monday morning. After Marcus hung up, he sat in his kitchen thinking about the situation. Derek was clearly escalating his behavior and focusing more attention on Marcus specifically. The fake security team was becoming bolder about harassing residents and claiming authority they did not have. Sooner or later, someone was going to get hurt, and Marcus was starting to think that Derek might do something stupid enough to force Marcus to reveal who he really was. When that happened, Derek was going to get the surprise of his life. Monday morning brought Marcus the background report he had requested on Derek Hoffman. What he read made him realize the situation was more serious than he had thought. Derek had been arrested 4 times in the past 5 years, not just twice as Marcus had initially found. The other 2 arrests were in different states before Derek moved to this area. One was for stalking an ex-girlfriend who had broken up with him. The other was for assault during a road rage incident. Derek had also been fired from 3 different security guard jobs for aggressive behavior toward the public. One employer had noted that Derek seemed to enjoy confronting people and would create problems where none existed. Most troubling was a psychological evaluation from Derek's last attempt to join law enforcement. The report described Derek as having authority issues and an unhealthy desire to control others. The psychologist had recommended that Derek not be given any position involving power over other people. Marcus set the report aside and got ready for work. As sheriff, he dealt with dangerous people all the time. But those people were criminals who had already broken the law. Derek was different. He was a potential problem living right in Marcus's neighborhood, getting worse every day. That evening, Marcus decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear his head. It was a warm night and he wanted to enjoy the quiet streets and think about what to do regarding Derek. He was walking past the neighborhood park when he heard voices ahead. As he got closer, he could see Derek and his 2 companions standing near the playground equipment. They were talking to a woman with 2 young children. Marcus could not hear the exact words, but the woman looked upset and frightened. The children were hiding behind their mother. Derek was pointing at something and shaking his head. Marcus walked closer, staying in the shadows of some trees. "Ma'am, I've told you 3 times now," Derek was saying in a loud voice. "Children are not allowed in the park after 8 o'clock. It's a safety regulation." "But it's only 8:15, the woman protested. "And there's still plenty of daylight. My kids just wanted to play for a few more minutes." "Rules are rules," the blonde man said. 8 o'clock means 8 o'clock. "I've never heard of this rule," the woman said. "We've been coming to this park for 2 years. "Well, now you know," Derek replied. "And since you're in violation, I need to see some identification." "Identification? For being in a park?" "For violating park regulations and failing to comply with security instructions." The woman looked around nervously. "I don't think I have to show you my ID." Derek stepped closer to her. "Ma'am, you're on private property owned by the homeowner association. Security personnel have the right to verify that you're authorized to be here." "I live here," the woman said. "I live on Oak Street." "Then you should have no problem providing identification to prove that." Marcus had heard enough. This was harassment, pure and simple. Derek was using his fake authority to intimidate a mother and her children for no legitimate reason. Marcus stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the group. "Good evening," he said in a friendly voice. "Is everything okay here?" Derek spun around, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Everything is fine. This is security business." "I'm Marcus Rodriguez," Marcus said to the woman. "I live over on Maple Drive. Is there some kind of problem?" "They're saying my children can't play in the park after 8 o'clock, the woman said. "But I've never heard of such a rule." "That's because there isn't such a rule," Marcus said calmly. Derek's face immediately turned red. "There absolutely is such a rule. Park hours are clearly posted." "Where?" Marcus asked. Derek pointed toward the entrance of the park. "Right there on the sign." Marcus walked over to look at the sign. It listed general park rules like clean up after your pet and no glass containers. There was nothing about closing hours or time restrictions. I don't see anything about 8 o'clock, Marcus said. It's an unwritten rule, the tall man said, for safety reasons. Unwritten rules aren't really rules, Marcus replied. They're just things you made up. Derek stepped between Marcus and the woman with children. Sir, you need to leave. This is official security business. Official according to who? Marcus asked. According to me. I'm the chief of security for this neighborhood. Really? Can you show me your credentials? Derek reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a laminated card. Marcus took it and examined it under the park lights. The card looked official, but Marcus could see it was homemade. It had Derek's photo and said Willowbrook Estate Security Chief, but there was no official seal or signature. It looked like something Derek had made on his computer and laminated at a copy shop. This isn't an official credential, Marcus said. It's just a piece of paper you made yourself. It's official enough, Derek snapped, grabbing the card back. Ma'am, Marcus said to the woman, you and your children have every right to be in this park. These men have no authority to ask for your ID or tell you when to leave. That's not true, Derek said angrily. We absolutely have that authority. No, you don't, Marcus said firmly. You're volunteers for the homeowner association, nothing more. You have no police powers and no legal authority over anyone. The blond man stepped forward aggressively. Who do you think you are? I'm a resident of this neighborhood who knows the difference between real authority and fake authority. Derek was getting more agitated by the minute. Sir, you need to stop interfering with our duties or we'll have to take action. What kind of action? Marcus asked. We'll place you under citizen's arrest for interfering with security operations. Marcus almost laughed. You're going to arrest me for telling the truth? You're creating a disturbance and undermining lawful security activities. There's nothing lawful about what you're doing. You're harassing a woman and her children based on rules that don't exist. Derek looked at his two companions, then back at Marcus. Sir, I'm ordering you to leave this park immediately. And I'm declining to follow your order, Marcus said calmly. Then you're under arrest. Derek reached for handcuffs on his utility belt. This was the moment Marcus had been dreading. Derek was about to cross the line from harassment into serious criminal behavior. Derek, I strongly advise you not to do that, Marcus said. You don't get to advise me about anything, Derek replied, pulling out the handcuffs. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. The woman with children gasped. You can't arrest him for talking. Ma'am, please step back, the tall man ordered. Marcus looked at Derek holding the handcuffs. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had moved to this neighborhood hoping for a quiet life. Now he was about to be illegally detained by a man with no authority and obvious mental health issues. Derek, listen to me very carefully, Marcus said in a voice that carried years of law enforcement experience. If you put those handcuffs on me, you will be committing false imprisonment, which is a felony. You will also be guilty of assault and battery. Are you sure you want to do that? I'm sure you need to learn some respect for authority, Derek replied. He stepped toward Marcus with the handcuffs open. That was when Marcus decided he had no choice but to end this situation once and for all. Derek, Marcus said quietly, before you do something you'll regret, there's something you need to know about me. I don't need to know anything about you except that you're under arrest. Derek reached for Marcus's arm. I'm a sheriff, Marcus said clearly. Derek froze with his hand halfway to Marcus's wrist. What did you say? I said I'm a sheriff. County Sheriff Marcus Rodriguez. And you just tried to illegally arrest a law enforcement officer. The color drained from Derek's face. The blond man took a step backward. The tall man started looking around like he wanted to run. You're lying, Derek said, but his voice had lost all its confidence. Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out his sheriff's badge and official identification. He held them where Derek could see them clearly under the park lights. No, Derek, I'm not lying. And you're in very big trouble. The park became completely silent except for the sound of children playing on swings in the distance. Derek stared at Marcus's badge and identification like he could not believe what he was seeing. That's impossible, Derek whispered. You said you work for county government doing paperwork. I do work for county government, Marcus replied calmly. I'm the elected sheriff of this county. There's quite a bit of paperwork involved. The blond man, whose name Marcus had learned was Brad, was backing away slowly. Derek, we need to leave. Right now. Nobody's leaving, Marcus said in the firm tone he used when arresting suspects. All three of you are going to stay right where you are while I call for backup. Derek's hands were shaking as he put the handcuffs back on his belt. Look, Sheriff, this is just a misunderstanding. We were doing our jobs, maintaining security like we're supposed to. Your jobs? Marcus repeated. Tell me, Derek, what exactly do you think your job is? We're neighborhood security. We keep the peace, enforce regulations, protect residents. And who gave you this job? Derek hesitated. The homeowner association. Really? Can you show me the contract where they hired you? Derek looked at Brad and Kevin, the tall man, but neither of them spoke. There is no contract, is there, Derek? Marcus continued. You three just decided to play police officer and hope nobody would call you on it. We volunteer our time to help the community, Kevin said defensively. By harassing residents? By demanding ID from people walking in public parks? By threatening to arrest anyone who questions your authority? The woman with the 2 children was still standing nearby, watching everything with wide eyes. Marcus turned to her. Ma'am, are you okay? Did these men threaten you or make you feel unsafe? Yes, she said immediately. They were very aggressive. They made me feel like I was doing something wrong just by being in the park with my kids. Marcus nodded and pulled out his cell phone. I'm calling for patrol units to come pick up these 3 gentlemen. Wait, Derek said quickly. You don't need to do that. We can work this out. Work what out, Derek? The fact that you've been impersonating law enforcement officers for months. The fact that you just tried to illegally detain a sheriff. The fact that you've been terrorizing your neighbors. We haven't been terrorizing anyone, Brad protested. We've been keeping the neighborhood safe. Safe from what? Old men watering their flowers? Women walking their dogs? Children playing in parks? Marcus dialed the number for dispatch. This is Sheriff Rodriguez. I need 2 patrol units to respond to Willowbrook Estates Neighborhood Park for 3 suspects involved in impersonating law enforcement officers. Sheriff Rodriguez? The dispatcher asked in surprise. Are you okay, sir? I'm fine, Maria. Just dealing with some wannabe cops who got a little too carried away with their fantasies. Units are on the way, Sheriff. Derek was starting to panic. Sheriff, please, can't we discuss this? We made some mistakes, but we were trying to do the right thing. The right thing? Marcus said. Derek, I've been watching you for weeks. You've harassed elderly residents, intimidated families, demanded identification from people who have every right to be where they are, and threatened to arrest anyone who questions you. That's not doing the right thing. That's being a bully with a badge you didn't earn. We never claimed to be real police officers, Kevin said. Marcus pointed at their uniforms. You're wearing official-looking uniforms with badges. Your vehicle has emergency lights. You carry handcuffs and demand to see people's identification. You threaten to detain and arrest people. How is that not impersonating police officers? It's just neighborhood security, Derek said weakly. No, Derek. Real neighborhood security involves watching for suspicious activity and calling the police when necessary. Real security guards don't demand ID, don't issue citations, and definitely don't threaten to arrest people. Marcus could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. Sheriff, Derek said desperately, I've always wanted to be in law enforcement. That's all this was about. I was trying to serve my community. By failing the police academy 3 times, by getting arrested for impersonating officers in 2 other counties, by stalking your ex-girlfriend and getting into road rage incidents. Derek's face went white. How do you know about that? Because I'm a real sheriff, Derek. I have access to real databases with real information about people's criminal histories. The first patrol car pulled into the park with its lights flashing. 2 officers got out and walked over to where Marcus was standing with Derek and his companions. Sheriff Rodriguez, one of the officers said, What's the situation here? Officers Miller and Johnson, Marcus replied. These 3 men have been operating an unauthorized security operation in this neighborhood. They've been harassing residents, demanding identification, issuing fake citations, and just now attempted to illegally detain me. Officer Miller looked at Derek. Brad and Kevin in their security uniforms. Are you guys licensed security guards? No, Marcus answered for them. They're just volunteers who decided to play cop without any training, certification, or legal authority. We have the right to provide security for our neighborhood, Derek said, but his voice had no conviction left. Actually, you don't, Officer Johnson replied. Not dressed like police officers and not claiming powers you don't have. The second patrol car arrived, and 2 more officers joined the group. Derek Hoffman, Marcus said officially. You're under arrest for impersonating a law enforcement officer, harassment, and attempted false imprisonment. Officer Miller stepped forward with handcuffs. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. As Derek was being handcuffed, he looked at Marcus with a mixture of anger and desperation. This isn't fair. We were trying to help. Derek, let me explain something to you, Marcus said. Real law enforcement isn't about having power over people. It's about serving and protecting the community. You weren't protecting anyone. You were just feeding your own ego by bullying people who couldn't fight back. Brad Wilson and Kevin Parks, Marcus continued. You're also under arrest as accomplices. As all three men were being read their rights and placed in patrol cars, more neighbors began gathering to watch. Marcus could see Helen standing near the edge of the park looking shocked. The woman with the children came over to Marcus. Thank you so much for helping us. I was really scared. You don't need to thank me, ma'am. This is what we're supposed to do. I had no idea you were a sheriff. You've been so quiet and normal. Marcus smiled. That's because I am normal. Being a sheriff is just my job. It doesn't make me better than anyone else or give me the right to push people around. After the patrol cars left with Derek, Brad, and Kevin, Marcus walked home through the quiet neighborhood streets. Several neighbors waved to him, and he could see people talking in small groups about what had just happened. When he got to his house, Helen was waiting for him on his front porch. Marcus, she said, I can't believe you're a sheriff. Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to be just another neighbor, Marcus replied. I moved here to get away from work, not to bring work home with me. But Derek and his friends, they've been bothering people for months. You could have stopped them right away. Marcus sat down on his porch steps. I was hoping they would calm down on their own. I didn't want to use my authority unless I absolutely had to. Well, I'm glad you finally did. Maybe now this neighborhood can be peaceful again. As Helen walked back to her house, Marcus looked around at his quiet street. Tomorrow there would probably be reporters wanting to interview him about the fake security guards. There would be questions from the homeowner association about how this had been allowed to happen. But tonight, for the first time since he moved to Willowbrook Estates, Marcus felt like he could really relax. Derek and his companions were in jail where they belonged. The neighborhood was safe from their harassment. And Marcus could go back to being just another resident who happened to be a sheriff. It was exactly what he had wanted all along. The next morning, Marcus woke up to find 3 news vans parked on his street. Word had gotten out about the fake security guards, and reporters wanted to talk to the sheriff, who had exposed them. Marcus got dressed and walked outside to find a reporter from Channel 7 News waiting on his lawn, with a camera crew. Sheriff Rodriguez, the reporter called out. Can you tell us about last night's arrests? Marcus paused on his front steps. As a public official, he was used to dealing with the media, but he had hoped to keep his private life separate from his work. 3 individuals were arrested for impersonating law enforcement officers and harassment, Marcus said simply. The investigation is ongoing. Is it true that they had been operating a fake security service in your neighborhood for months? Yes, that appears to be the case. And you were living here the whole time without revealing your identity as sheriff? I moved to this neighborhood as a private citizen. I only revealed my profession when these individuals attempted to illegally detain me. More reporters gathered as Marcus spoke. Someone from the local newspaper asked, Sheriff, what charges are the suspects facing? Derek Hoffman is charged with impersonating a law enforcement officer, harassment, attempted false imprisonment, and assault. His 2 accomplices, Brad Wilson and Kevin Parks, are charged as accessories to those crimes. Could you tell us more about their activities in the neighborhood? Marcus thought carefully about how much to say. These individuals wore official-looking uniforms and claimed to have authority they did not possess. They harassed residents, demanded identification without cause, issued fake citations, and threatened to arrest people who questioned their actions. A reporter from Channel 12 asked, how long had this been going on? Based on witness statements, several months at least, possibly longer. After answering a few more questions, Marcus excused himself and drove to his office at the county courthouse. He had real sheriff business to take care of, including making sure the case against Derek and his friends was handled properly. At the courthouse, Detective Wilson was waiting with more information about the 3 arrested men. Sheriff, we found some interesting things when we searched Derek Hoffman's house, Wilson said. He had a whole room set up like a police command center. Maps of the neighborhood, files on various residents, even surveillance photos he had taken without people's knowledge. Marcus looked through the evidence photos. Derek had been keeping detailed records of his neighbors' activities. He had notes about their daily routines, who visited them, when they left for work, even what cars they drove. "This is stalking behavior," Marcus said. He wasn't just playing security guard. He was obsessed with controlling his neighbors. "Gets worse," Wilson continued. "We found evidence that he was planning to expand his operation. He had applications to start a private security company and was looking into buying real police equipment. Any indication that he was planning to escalate to more serious crimes? Hard to say for sure, but his internet search history shows he was researching citizens' arrest laws and how to legally detain people. He was also looking at equipment for conducting interrogations." Marcus shook his head. Derek had been much more dangerous than anyone had realized. "What about the other two?" "Brad Wilson seems to have just gone along with whatever Derek wanted. No real initiative of his own. Kevin Parks is a little different, though. He has a history of domestic violence and was apparently enjoying the power trip as much as Derek was." "Okay, make sure all three are held without bail until their hearing. I don't want them back in that neighborhood causing more problems." Later that morning, Marcus met with the district attorney to discuss the charges. "Sheriff, this is a pretty clear-cut case," DA Patricia Chen said. "Impersonating law enforcement is a felony, and we have multiple witnesses to their behavior. The attempted detention of you gives us the false imprisonment charge. What kind of sentences are we looking at? Hoffman could get up to 5 years in prison if convicted on all charges. The other two might get less depending on how much they cooperate. And their ability to do this again? If they're convicted of felony impersonation charges, they'll never be able to work in any kind of security or law enforcement capacity. They'll also be prohibited from owning any equipment that could be used to impersonate officers." That afternoon, Marcus received a call from the president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowner Association. "Sheriff Rodriguez, I'm Janet Miller," the woman said. "I can't tell you how sorry we are about this whole situation. We had no idea what Derek and his friends were doing." "How did they get started operating in the neighborhood?" Marcus asked. "Derek approached us about 6 months ago and said he was concerned about security. He offered to organize a volunteer patrol to watch for suspicious activity. We thought it sounded like a good idea." "Did you give him any official authority?" "No, absolutely not. We told him that any patrol would be strictly observational. No confronting people, no demanding identification, just watching and calling the police if necessary." "So he completely ignored your instructions?" "Completely. When residents started complaining about aggressive behavior, we tried to talk to Derek about it. But he always insisted he was just doing his job and that people needed to respect his authority." "Why didn't you fire him?" Janet sighed. "We tried to, but Derek said we couldn't fire volunteers and that he would continue patrolling whether we wanted him to or not. We were actually planning to call the police ourselves when your incident happened." "Well, the problem is solved now. Derek and his friends won't be bothering anyone for a long time. Sheriff, the Homeowner Association would like to make a public apology to you and to all the residents who were harassed. We're also going to implement new policies to make sure something like this never happens again." "That sounds appropriate," Marcus said. 3 days later, Derek, Brad, and Kevin appeared in court for their initial hearing. Marcus was there to testify about the incident in the park and to provide evidence about their months of harassment. Derek's lawyer argued that his client had been trying to help the community and had just gotten carried away with his duties. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "Mr. Hoffman genuinely believed he was providing a valuable service to his neighborhood. He never intended to break any laws." Judge Patricia Gonzalez was not impressed. "Mr. Hoffman, you wore police uniforms, carried handcuffs, demanded identification from citizens, and attempted to arrest a sheriff. Whether you intended to break laws or not, you clearly did break them." Derek stood up. "Your Honor, I was just trying to keep my neighborhood safe. I've always wanted to be a police officer." "Mr. Hoffman, wanting to be a police officer doesn't give you the right to pretend to be one. Real police officers go through extensive training and psychological evaluation. They're held accountable for their actions. You gave yourself authority that you hadn't earned and used it to intimidate innocent people." The judge set bail at $50,000 for Derek and $25,000 each for Brad and Kevin. None of them could afford to pay, so they remained in jail. Over the next few weeks, More residents of Willowbrook Estates came forward with stories about Derek's harassment. An elderly woman said Derek had followed her home from the grocery store and demanded to search her car for stolen items. A teenager said Derek had questioned him for 2 hours about who he was visiting in the neighborhood. The case gained attention throughout the county as an example of what could happen when people with no training or authority decided to take law enforcement into their own hands. Marcus was interviewed by several newspapers and television stations. He used the opportunity to educate people about the difference between legitimate neighborhood watch programs and vigilante groups. Real community policing involves cooperation between residents and trained law enforcement. Marcus explained to one reporter, "It's about being observant and reporting suspicious activity, not about confronting people or claiming authority you don't have." What should residents do if they encounter someone like Derek Hoffman? Call the real police immediately. Don't argue with them or try to reason with them. People who impersonate law enforcement officers often have serious psychological issues and can be dangerous. 6 weeks later, Derek, Brad, and Kevin all pled guilty to the charges against them. Derek was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 5 years of probation. Brad and Kevin each received 1 year in jail and 3 years of probation. As part of their plea agreements, all 3 men were permanently banned from working in any security or law enforcement capacity. They were also required to pay restitution to the homeowner association for the cost of dealing with the incident. On the day of sentencing, Derek asked to speak to Marcus privately. "Sheriff," Derek said, "I want you to know that I really did think I was helping people." Marcus looked at the man who had caused so much trouble in his neighborhood. "Derek, I believe that you thought you were helping, but the road to trouble is paved with good intentions. You can't help people by scaring them and pushing them around. I know that now. I'm going to get counseling while I'm in prison. Maybe when I get out I can find a way to actually help my community instead of hurting it." "I hope so, Derek. Everyone deserves a second chance to do better." 3 months after Derek and his fake security team were sent to prison, Willowbrook Estates had become a completely different place. The change was obvious to everyone who lived there. Marcus noticed it first on his evening walks. Before, residents would hurry inside when they saw anyone in a uniform or official-looking vehicle. Now people were relaxed and friendly. Children played in the park without their parents looking worried. Elderly residents worked in their gardens without constantly checking over their shoulders. The homeowner association had called a special meeting to address what had happened and to make sure it never happened again. Marcus attended the meeting at the request of several neighbors who wanted him to help establish new policies. Janet Miller, the HOA president, stood up in front of about 50 residents who had gathered in the community center. "First," Janet said, "I want to apologize to everyone for what happened with Derek Hoffman and his security group. The HOA board failed to properly supervise their activities, and many of you suffered because of our mistakes." An elderly man in the front row raised his hand. "Janet, we're not blaming the HOA. How could you have known that Derek was crazy?" "We should have done background checks," Janet replied. "We should have set clear limits on what volunteers could and could not do. We should have listened more carefully when people complained about aggressive behavior." Marcus was sitting in the back of the room trying to stay out of the spotlight, but Janet looked directly at him. "Sheriff Rodriguez, would you be willing to help us establish proper guidelines for any future security or neighborhood watch programs?" Marcus stood up. "I'd be happy to help. But first let me say that what Derek was doing wasn't security or neighborhood watch. It was harassment and intimidation. Real community safety programs work with law enforcement, not instead of law enforcement." A woman in the middle of the room asked, "Sheriff, what should we do if we see suspicious activity in the neighborhood?" "Call the police," Marcus said simply. "That's what we're here for. Don't confront strangers, don't follow people around, don't try to detain anyone. Just observe and report." "But what if the police don't come quickly enough?" another resident asked. "Then you wait," Marcus replied. "I know that's frustrating sometimes, but untrained civilians trying to handle security situations usually make things worse, not better." Helen Martinez raised her hand. "Sheriff, I have to say that having you living in the neighborhood has made all of us feel much safer. Not because you're watching us, but because we know there's someone nearby who actually knows what they're doing." Marcus smiled. "Helen, I appreciate that, but I want to be clear about something. I moved here to be your neighbor, not your personal security guard. If there's ever a real emergency, of course I'll help. But day to day, I'm just another resident who happens to have a law enforcement background. Over the next hour, the residents worked with Marcus to establish new guidelines for community safety. They agreed that any future security activities would be limited to observation and reporting. No one would be allowed to wear uniforms that could be confused with police clothing. No one would be allowed to carry handcuffs, demand identification, or claim any kind of authority over other residents. Most importantly, any security volunteers would have to pass background checks and complete training provided by the sheriff's department. The goal, Marcus explained, is to have residents who are aware of what's happening in their neighborhood and can serve as extra eyes and ears for law enforcement. Not to have wannabe cops running around harassing people. After the meeting, many residents came up to thank Marcus for his help. But the conversation that meant the most to him was with Frank Williams, the elderly man Derek had harassed about his flowers. "Sheriff," Frank said, "I want you to know that Derek really scared me. I'm 82 years old and I was starting to think I might need to move somewhere else just to avoid him. You shouldn't have had to deal with that. Frank, I'm sorry it went on as long as it did, but you stopped it. And now I can work in my garden again without worrying about some angry man coming to yell at me." A few weeks later, Marcus was surprised to receive a letter from Derek in prison. The letter was short and handwritten. "Sheriff Rodriguez," Derek had written, "I have been thinking a lot about what happened. I realize now that I was wrong about almost everything. I thought being tough and demanding made me seem like a real police officer. But I've been watching the officers here at the prison and they're nothing like how I acted. They're professional and calm and they treat people with respect, even when they're arresting them. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused in your neighborhood. I hope when I get out of prison I can find a better way to serve my community." Marcus was glad to see that Derek seemed to be learning from his mistakes. Prison was supposed to be about rehabilitation as well as punishment, and maybe Derek would come out a better person than he went in. The transformation of Willowbrook Estates continued throughout the summer. The HOA organized a neighborhood barbecue where residents could get to know each other better. Children started playing together more often. People began looking out for each other in positive ways instead of suspicious ways. Marcus found himself becoming more involved in neighborhood activities than he had originally planned. He helped coach a youth baseball team, participated in a community garden project, and even agreed to give a presentation at the local school about law enforcement careers. "I thought you wanted to keep your work and personal life separate." Helen teased him one day as they worked together planting vegetables in the community garden. "I did," Marcus replied, "but I've learned that you can't really separate who you are from what you do. Being a sheriff isn't just my job. It's part of my identity, and this community has become part of my identity too. Are you glad you moved here?" Marcus looked around at his neighbors working in the garden, children playing safely in the nearby park, and the peaceful street where he lived. "Yes," he said, "even with all the drama, I'm glad I moved here. This is home now." 6 months after Derek's arrest, Marcus received some unexpected news. The County Board of Supervisors had voted to give him a commendation for his handling of the situation. "Sheriff Rodriguez," the board chairman said at the presentation ceremony, "you showed remarkable restraint and professionalism in a difficult situation. You could have ended this problem immediately by revealing your identity, but instead you tried to resolve it peacefully. When that became impossible, you acted decisively to protect your community." Marcus accepted the award but felt somewhat uncomfortable with the attention. "I was just doing what any law enforcement officer should do, protecting people who can't protect themselves." After the ceremony, Marcus drove home to Willowbrook Estates. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw children playing in the park, neighbors talking over fence lines, and people walking their dogs without fear. It was exactly what he had hoped for when he first moved to the neighborhood. A peaceful place where people could live their lives without harassment or intimidation. Marcus had learned something important from the whole experience. He had moved to Willowbrook Estates thinking he could leave his work identity behind and just be a regular citizen. But the Derek Hoffman situation had taught him that being a sheriff wasn't something he could turn on and off like a switch. He was a sheriff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But that didn't mean he had to be aggressive or controlling like Derek had been. Real law enforcement was about serving people, protecting them, and helping them solve their problems. Most of the time, that meant doing his regular job at the county courthouse. but sometimes it meant standing up to bullies in neighborhood parks. As Marcus sat on his front porch that evening, watching his neighbors enjoy their peaceful community, he realized that Derek had actually done him a favor. The fake security guard had forced Marcus to figure out how to be both Sheriff Rodriguez and neighbor Marcus at the same time, and that integration had made him better at both roles. The next morning, Marcus got a call from Janet Miller about a new issue in the neighborhood. "Sheriff," Janet said, "we have a problem with teenagers speeding through the neighborhood on skateboards. Some residents are worried someone's going to get hurt." Marcus smiled. "Janet, that sounds like a job for the regular police. But as a neighbor, I'd be happy to talk to the kids and see if we can work something out." It was exactly the kind of balance Marcus had been looking for. He would always be a sheriff, but now he knew how to be a good neighbor too. And Willowbrook Estates would always be grateful for both.